Joe Biden was sworn in as the 46th president of the United States. And of course, he did give a speech to really note and highlight what he wants the tone of his presidency to be. So we have a few snippets of his speech for you. Let's take a quick look and we'll discuss.
On this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries.
So he's, of course, specifically referring to the rioters, the insurrectionists who breached the Capitol and then proceeded to murder a police officer with a flagpole and a fire extinguisher. And then of course, 4 other people also died during those riots. So it really hasn't been a peaceful transition of power, unfortunately. And Donald Trump conceded only after the riots took place and he was pressured to do so. But it was kind of strange to see the events at the Capitol today and kind of juxtapose that with what we experienced a few weeks ago.
Oh, I thought you were talking to another one. Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Oh, you thought I was talking to the other co-host?
No, I thought you were throwing to a video. You had a very declarative end to your statement. But anyway, yeah, no, 100%. And one of the things that I try to bear in mind in terms of the speech, look, I think that Biden's fine. I don't think that he's one of our best public speakers or anything like that. I generally liked the message, and I thought the delivery for him was pretty good. There were only a couple of stumbles. So we also have to bear in mind that apparently it was based on Bernie, which we'll get to, incredibly cold there, and it is more difficult to give a speech during that. But having a person who sounds relatively, with his message of unity, if that carries too far into his political strategy, it's going to be a massive problem, and we have reason to believe that it might. But in terms of having a person that is not either explicitly or wink, wink, inspiring more extremism is a good thing. We had to sit through Trump's inauguration speech and his States of the Union and his various addresses of the nation. And every one generally was horrific, but even before that, as you're watching it, you're just waiting for the shock. What insane line is he gonna say? And I didn't really fear that during the Biden speech, which was a nice change of pace.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as you guys know through watching our show and listening to our analysis on Joe Biden's record and some of his proposals and his cabinet picks as well. There's plenty of critique and criticism to be made, and we're gonna continue on with that in an honest way that provides the receipts. But at the same time, I think the one giant difference, and this is exactly what you're alluding to, John, is that on one hand, you had someone like Donald Trump who loved to provoke violence in this country, who loved to divide and conquer. That was really the essence of his governing style, if you could call it governing. Whereas with Joe Biden, even if you disagree with him politically or policy-wise, you at least see that he's someone who understands the importance of the constitutional protections we have in place, understands the importance of our democratic process, understands the importance of doing what he can through his rhetoric to at least attempt to unify people. Obviously, I'm very skeptical about the ability to do that, but it really does start at the top. We need leadership in the country that doesn't seek to divide the country further in order to use that as a tactic to accomplish more of what he wants to do. And that's what we saw with Donald Trump. So we have another video where he talks a little bit about domestic terrorism and violence, and racism in the country. Let's hear what he had to say about that.
A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart.
So I agree with that last sentence, certainly. But I do worry about how he intends on rooting out domestic terrorism in the country, right? Because what we've seen, especially through the riots that happened in the Capitol, is that you have members of the military, you have members of the Capitol Police and local police departments throughout the country who are sympathizers for the kind of ideology that persuades these guys to go march in Charlottesville and chant things like Jews will not replace us. Like there needs to be a robust investigation into the military, into law enforcement, to ensure that the very people who have taken an oath to protect and serve, the very people who have taken an oath to serve the best interests of this country are actually doing that and not engaging in the extremism and the racism that is helping to tear the country apart. I worry that his policies, whatever may come moving forward to root out domestic terrorism, is gonna put most of the surveillance and onus on ordinary Americans. But really, we need to look at systems and see how systems help to perpetuate the system of violence and racism that was exploited by Donald Trump for his own political purposes.
Yeah, and hopefully, like we've been through a period where you not only have Donald Trump and up and coming Republican politicians being willing to say or do whatever to get popularity, even if it radicalizes people, causes them to believe insane things about the country, about their political opponents and those sorts of things. You have tech platforms that create algorithms that have, whether the intent, they have the effect of radicalizing people, and a very fraught history of trying to reform that in recent years. And certainly, look, there are things that Biden could aim to do in terms of fighting the terrorism that we might consider to be overreaches in terms of domestic surveillance, sure. What I would like, though, is to not have a president who seems to be there to ensure that the FBI, the DOJ, all of that take a very hands-off approach to militia groups, domestic terrorism, racist attacks, and things like that. Not like I guess the hallmark version of this is them dismantling that organization that looked into domestic terrorism. But in general, like I have a feeling that is a philosophy that pervaded. It's not to say that they didn't successfully stop certain plots. They did. They caught Cesar Sayoc, the Coast Guard lieutenant who wanted to start some sort of war. There's the militia that wanted to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. There were other plots and things like that. But we also have to remember that, and maybe some other countries that have failed have had this. We have this melange of extremist groups that have the benefit of having a massive media organization and Fox News and the rest on the right that in best case scenario with the most extreme terror, we'll just not talk about it and we'll pretend that it's not there. But in some cases, we'll actually run defense for those attackers. Tucker Carlson, his monologues since that Capitol attack have been about how this isn't a big deal and you shouldn't worry about it. And these are just people who love their country and all of that. And that's what we've seen for all of these. Cesar Sayoc, he just got out of control. He wasn't really trying to kill anyone. These are the things they spent years saying. And so Biden is gonna have to fight not just the actual terrorists, but whatever he does to try to investigate that, to find them and all of that, he's gonna be attacked constantly by right-wing media for doing this. That he's targeting right-wingers or he's infringing on whatever, their Q patriotism, I don't know.
No, they're gonna cry and cry and cry because the very people who claim that, the left, they engage in victimhood all the time. The right wing loves engaging in victimhood. It's their bread and butter. It's what they thrive on. I mean, people like Ben Shapiro wouldn't exist if it weren't for right wing victimhood. But I just think that the most important way to help better our society, and I love the fact that you mentioned social media, is again to look at how certain systems are set up, right? So there shouldn't be this ability for social media platforms to literally set their algorithms in a way that increases or incentivizes divisive content because it increases engagement, right? Like that has been a pretty big problem. There's also the issue of information bubbles. People end up, just existing in these information bubbles within social media where they only get access to certain narratives that further reinforce their preconceived notions or further reinforce whatever propaganda they're getting from right-wing media. there needs to be a real discussion about, the way media is set up in this country. And I'm so tired of the false equivalencies. I'm tired of people pretending as if, CNN is the left-wing version of Fox or OAN. Like, let's please stop drawing those false equivalencies, because that is exactly what stands in the way of having an honest discussion about real solutions. And so I do want to go to one more video featuring Biden, because here he talks about something that's been bothering me since he won the presidency, and it's this talk of unity. We want the country to be calmer. We do want people to unite, but at the same time, I feel like some of his language here comes off as naive. Okay, let's watch.
To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this: bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause, the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward.
So there's a lot of talk of unity, John, but there isn't really much of a discussion of how you accomplish unity through the executive branch. I mean, again, toning down the hateful, divisive rhetoric is important, and he no doubt has already done that and will continue to do that. But there are policies that are important, right? So is he planning on, a continuation of Obama era type policies, or is he really gonna follow through on something, closer to the left, right? We're not gonna get what we want with Medicare for all. I mean, he's been very clear about his willingness to veto that type of policy, but he certainly has moved to the left when it comes to other important agenda items for the left, including a more robust approach toward combating climate change. If you read the details of his climate plan, it's not the Green New Deal, but it comes pretty close. And he seems to be more on board with real economic relief, as opposed to being so concerned with deficit spending and what it does to the nation's debt. So I like that messaging, and it's hard to really sit here and speculate, because you have to really see what kind of actions he takes once he's finally governing. But based on his rhetoric, it seems like there are some positive forces having a positive influence on him. So we'll see how that goes. But one thing I will say real quick, and then I'll turn it over to you, John, is I get that everyone wants to be super cynical. I get that everyone's pessimistic. I'm queen of pessimism, I totally get that. But at the same time, if you start off from a place of low expectations, then you're not going to appropriately hold him accountable or apply appropriate pressure to organize and possibly accomplish some policy goals that we want. So don't start off with like a defeatist mentality of like, nothing's gonna work, he's just gonna be a disappointment and I'm gonna check out. No, I mean, we need to at least have high expectations and fight. We have to fight, and we have a better chance at accomplishing things under this presidency as opposed to Trump's presidency, which I'm elated he's not gonna have a second term for.
Yeah, and it probably doesn't need to be said, but you have a much better chance of succeeding if you actually try, rather than if you just detach yourself from politics and go off for a few years and then come back for the next presidential election or something. That's not gonna work. Yeah, there are areas where he during the primary said some really disconcerting things. I mean, obviously about healthcare, but in general, I mean, the quote that we go back to a lot is nothing will fundamentally change. I get that he means it more in the way that speech was talking about, but that's worrying That said, as you point out, there are areas where in theory, he could do quite a lot. And it seems sort of like, I mean, the fact that he's pushing for, $15, an hour minimum wage, or, a climate plan, at least on the road to the Green New Deal, is basically thanks to awesome progressives, especially Bernie Sanders running at the national level in 2 cycles now. Even Joe Biden has been pushed to some of these positions that he certainly wouldn't have held 10 years ago. So that's definitely good. My fear remains, though, that when he says, like he does his speech about how we'll never have peace without getting rid of the divisiveness and all that. That's good. I think a lot of people want to hear that stuff. But I really hope that he gets that it is just not a thing that all Americans agree that what we want is peace. We don't all. Like in theory, you could have situations where there's an escalation of tensions and partisanship and all of that, but everybody wants to get back to some sort of normal thing. But that's not, for a significant portion of the country, that's not what they want. These MAGA people, the Q people, they're not interested in peace with the Satanists. They believe that we all eat babies. They don't want peace with us. And perhaps more importantly, right-wing media is in an arms race with itself to get those people to watch them. And so they will say whatever crazy thing they need to do that. And we already have a ton of people who want to be the next Trump. They are going to be spreading insanity for the next few years, not peace. I don't know who's gonna win the next Republican primary, but it's not gonna be their version of a Joe Biden. It's gonna be some form of a crazy person doing a Trump impersonation. That's probably what it's gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be Nikki Haley, she's bad enough, but it's gonna be a Josh Hawley or a Tucker Carlson or a Ted Cruz or something. And so I say that just that I hope he is ready. Like you can do your unity speech and all that. You can even try a little bit. But don't waste 4 years like Obama did, reaching your hand out into the lawnmower blade. It doesn't get you anywhere. It certainly doesn't fix our problems.
No, exactly. Like right now, I mean, a perfect example of that. And that's what I meant when I said that he sounds naive. And I'm sure he has some knowledge of how awful some of these people are. I'm talking about the Josh Hawleys, Ted Cruz's of the world, who can literally experience this insurrectionist riot in the Capitol building and then continue on with their sham allegations of widespread voter fraud, of which there's absolutely no evidence. So those types of people are never gonna change. They're always going to be self-interested, and they're gonna always do what they can to undermine any possible success that Biden could have in passing policies that are good for the American people. So yes, he's definitely naive in that regard.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.